We are joined from a chilly Norman, Oklahoma by Eddie Radosevich and George Stoia from Sooner Scoop. Gentlemen, how are we handling the elements?
Good. I think better than Saturday up in Lawrence, but it's time to move on, I think, for a lot of people around Norman. So it's going well. It's going well. I think that people forget that Oklahoma was 6-7 a year ago, as opposed to 7-1 now. Although it's rather disappointing the way that everything went down.
I would agree with that, Eddie. My hands though are still cold. My hands have been cold for like 4 days straight. So I'm ready for some more
Sat
weather.
at a press box on Saturday.
I know, but I whatever. I complained. I'm not built like Eddie.
So you mentioned that people need to remember last year. Would these be the people that are ready to fire coordinators after a single loss?
Yes, I would say so. I think that because of the Texas win and the way that Oklahoma performed, I think that a lot of people, including probably George and myself, thought things were accelerated a little bit. And, the last couple of weeks after the Texas game and coming out of the bye, it's been a step back. But I think that, there's still a lot to play for. I know that's kind of the cliche line that, the players and the coaches will tell you going into this week, and what is going to be a kind of a monumental bedlam around here with it being the finale. Is that, I don't want to speak for you, George.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Andy, you and I talked about it a couple weeks ago after OU beat Texas. The expectations changed, right? Everything felt accelerated within the program. I think people kind of had a reality check when Oklahoma lost to Kansas. But I also look at the Kansas game and even the UCF game, because they could have lost that game as well, as everything's fixable. Like everything, like me and Eddie rewatched the game. They just played terrible. Like it was just like the game plan wasn't good. They're turning the ball over in spots they typically don't. The defense is missing tackles, which has not really been an issue all season. And so I think while Saturday was a tough and frustrating loss for Oklahoma fans, I do think there's a good chance they turn things around this week. Now, we'll see. It's a big game. OSU's playing with a lot of momentum. They're playing really good football. It's Bedlam. You never know what's going to happen in that game, right? But I do think that while it felt like the earth was falling on Saturday, I do think that things are not as bad as they probably really seem.
Yeah, they're in control of everything they can be in control of right now, but they are going to Stillwater for a game that it's a huge rivalry, and the cherry on top of it is they're really pissed that Oklahoma is leaving for the SEC. They've said they don't want to play this anymore. And of course, they would like to send Oklahoma out with an L. How much does the emotion of it matter? I know Brent Venables kind of poo-pooed it. Mike Gundy did not poo-poo it. He talked about spitting on Bosworth and Bosworth spitting on him. How intense is it going to be out there?
I think, Eddie, the thing that I realized, at least the last couple of days, because we talked to some players last night, it was the same tone as Brent. I mean, they're getting questions like, what does it mean, this being the last Bedlam? They're like, for us, it's just another game. We're just preparing for another game. Is it a big game? Sure. But we're trying to go 1-0 this week. We're not worried about the rivalry. It felt like that was Brent's tone as well today. Whereas in Stillwater, I think it is a little bit different because like you said, this is a big one, being the last one. And obviously you look at the all-time record, and Oklahoma's really controlled the rivalry. But if Oklahoma State can go out with a win in the last one in what seems like maybe a really long time, then that would be huge for them. Whereas I think Oklahoma's approaching it in a way that's, hey, we just need to get back on track and win a football game to achieve the goals that we set before the season.
The most amazing thing is I think that Oklahoma's won 17 of the last 20, and to say that they're 17-3 over the last 20 years, it certainly doesn't feel like it. And, it's interesting to hear Mike Gundy talk about his stance on Bedlam. Everybody knows his record against Oklahoma as a head coach hasn't been very good. And it's almost like, does he build it up too much in his mind as opposed to what Brent does? This is his second time around coaching as a head coach in the game and saying that it's just another game. It worked for him against Texas. They came out, and the physicality that offensive line, defensive line played with, you have to find a way to replicate that. They just haven't been able to find that same rhythm or whatever that emotion is here over the last couple of weeks. And I don't know if it's certainly not looking ahead to this game, because everything that went into trying to get to 8-0 And, I think the disappointment from last week, I expect them to bounce back this week and play a really solid game. I don't know if that necessarily means that they win the football game as well as Ollie Gordon's running the football. It's going to be interesting to see kind of that chess match between Brent Venables and Mike Gundy come Saturday.
I'm glad you mentioned Ollie Gordon, Eddie, because Oklahoma's banged up linebackers. They just gave up 5.5 yards a carry to a Kansas team that carried it 41 times. Ollie Gordon is just the last 3 games, he's on like a Heisman pace. So how are they going to handle that rushing attack as banged up as they are?
I think it starts up front. To put it the most simple way that I think I know how, they got their ass whooped by Kansas, especially on the interior. And for a group that has played really, really well. It's kind of funny on our podcast on the Unofficial 40, we talked about last week how well the interior had been playing and how good of a job Todd Bates had done, not just on the recruiting side of things, but as well as with the group that he had. And a lot of those guys are transfers. A lot of those guys are they've had a good mix of guys that have come back from last year's team, Isaiah Coe and Jordan Kelly, and they have to play well, I think. And, you go into this game and you look at OU's defensive line versus Oklahoma State's offensive line, and Oklahoma State's still trying to find, I think, a certain rhythm within that offensive line group, but they've made it work over the last couple of weeks for Ollie Gordon, and he's broken a lot of tackles en route to what he's done over the last 4 weeks.
And I think too, Andy, the one thing for Oklahoma, if they're out Danny Stutzman, which it sounds like he's going to try and give it a go. We'll see. Even if he does, if he's limited.
Brent was a lot more positive about it today than I thought he would be.
And we don't know if he practiced on Monday or not. We'll see maybe tonight if he practices. But if they're down Danny Stutzman, while obviously he's one of the best linebackers in the country, they do feel really good about their linebacker depth. You saw Kip Lewis, a young guy, come in. He's been phenomenal in a backup role. We'll see if it's Jaron Kanik or Kobe McKenzie, but they do have some depth there. But those guys are those are 3 really young guys. When you talk about Kobe McKenzie, Jaron Kanik, and Kip Lewis having to step up against arguably the best running back in college football. So it's a tough test, man. And that front 7 is going to have to play really well, because I do think they're going to sell out to stop Ollie Gordon and say, okay, Alan Bowman, can you beat us?
So is this where that 6 and 7 version of Oklahoma last year would have been sunk with a couple of injuries in key spots and then just not being able to backfill?
Yeah. I think it's not only that, Andy, but also the leadership of this group. I think that last year you saw them lose some games and they crumbled and they would go on these losing streaks either in the middle of the season or at the end of the season. I think this group, at least talking to them last night, they're pretty refocused. And again, we'll see what happens this Saturday, but I do think they're going to be able to regroup. And like you said, I think the competitive depth, we heard that term all summer and off season, but I do think that they feel good about some of the young guys that can come in and help them, but also some of the older guys that are going to be the leaders trying to bounce back.
So reading your message board, I was kind of joking about everyone want to fire the coordinators, but it does seem like there is some angst toward Jeff Levy, which it's funny to me because the anger seems to be directed toward the one series after the interception at the end of the game where they didn't just sort of stick a knife in Kansas. And I'm like, you did give up 80 yards in a minute to lose the game. Like, it wasn't just the offense, but is the attitude that perhaps they need to be more aggressive offensively rather than keeping it conservative to protect a lead? Because it seems like this offense is the best when it's attacking.
Yeah, it was a kind of an out-of-body experience watching what they put forth on Saturday. I mean, they threw 2 plays over 10 yards, or allowed Dillon Gabriel to throw 2 plays over 10 yards in the first 75 plays of the game. It was wet. It was windy. It was a miserable day in Lawrence, Kansas. Jason Bean threw the ball 32 times. And I think that that's where the root of the kind of the anger comes. If you want to call it conservative, it was like the QAnon of conservative offensive play calling on Saturday. It was interesting also to hear Brent Venables talk about it on Tuesday. He was asked if they wanted to take more shots down the field, and he flat out said, yeah. I mean, he didn't come out and say yes, but the way that he answered it was basically they've had a talking with Jeff Levy. They need to become more aggressive. They need to let Dillon Gabriel do what he's done all season. When they've had success, Dillon Gabriel has played in an open offense, and I think that's why Saturday was so just kind of out of this world shocking to see that was the game plan that they went with.
And I think too, Andy, obviously that one drive is what everybody points to, and sure, they probably should have let Dillon Gabriel maybe throw the ball there to try and get a first down. He's been really good in those spots. But I go back to even coming out of halftime, they're up 21-17. You're moving the ball, you're running it, you're doing all sorts of things. And they come out in the first 3 possessions, it's punt, fumble, punt. And all of a sudden, Kansas is back in the game. And you've seen that throughout the season, whether it's SMU, they sputtered in the second half until they absolutely needed a drive. Even the Texas game, they're up 2 scores in the third quarter. They get a fumble at midfield and they go 3 and out and punt, and Texas gets back into the football game. You've just seen it time and again this year where they get a lead, they kind of start getting a little too cute on offense, to be cliche, or they get very conservative. They don't throw the ball down the field, and I think that that's where the anger comes from. It's not just that one drive. It's, hey, they need to be more aggressive, put teams away, and really attack some, honestly, not great defenses the last couple weeks.
That's where it's like, what is the identity of this offense? And I think that's a little bit scary for Oklahoma fans going into the 9th week of the season and still trying to figure a whole lot of stuff out, whether it be offensive line. You have a guy in Javonte Barnes that's getting massive carries at the end of the football game. He hadn't played for 6 weeks because of a foot injury that he had surgery on. So, or that's what a lot of people thought. And then all of a sudden he's magically healthy to play because Tawee Walker's banged up. Those are kind of the question marks right now. And they're still trying to dig themselves out of the Andrell Anthony injury that he suffered in the Texas game to find that guy to go to at wide receiver.
It does seem, though, that being more aggressive might behoove them at this point because there is no margin for error now. They have no excuse to be conservative because they can't afford to lose another game if they'd like to play for the national championship, play in the college football playoff. So I will be curious to see, like, do they come out just slinging it? Because that seems to be the best way to win the games remaining on the schedule.
No doubt. And that's something that we were talking about it before we jumped on with you. Dillon Gabriel, a year ago, completely different team, obviously, but he was 14 of 18, 224 yards and a 294 yard first quarter for Oklahoma against Oklahoma State. So I would expect them to be very aggressive, maybe even probably too aggressive to a certain extent. If you look up and you turn the ball over because you're taking so many chances in the first quarter, and maybe that's where it could backfire on you on Saturday because the crowd's going to be, the atmosphere is going to be unbelievable. I expect it to be. It's already a really good atmosphere at Boone Pickett Stadium. It's right on top of you. It's kind of a unique setting in terms of the way that the field's set up with the players and the sidelines. And I'm super interested to see how they attack Oklahoma State because I do think there is opportunity there, right, George?
Yeah, no, and I think they're still going to try and run the football. I think that it was Brent that said today that it was a concerted effort the last 2 weeks to try and run the football. The problem is they haven't been very good at it. Now they did run it, pretty effectively against Kansas. Now I don't think Kansas has the best rushing defense. Neither does Oklahoma State. So I still think they're going to try and run the football. But that running back room is just in a weird spot. Whether it's Gavin Sawchuk never seems to get going. Javonte Barnes is who knows what's going on with him with his foot, and then Tawee Walker. He got banged up at the end of that game. I mean, if he doesn't roll up his ankle there in the fourth quarter, they probably win the game. And so we'll see how healthy he is. But I think that's where it comes down to is, can they run the football? Because that's just been an issue all year for them.
Well, you knew Oklahoma wasn't going to be able to get out of the Big 12 without some excitement. You got Bedlam, you got Texas K-State, you got Iowa State, Kansas, all one-loss teams in Big 12 play, and there'll be 3 at the top tied at the end of Saturday. So we'll see if the Sooners are one of those. Thank you guys so much.
You bet, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.